Yes, it's the place. We're so happy to have you here at the place this evening. We are going to talk to Bob. Yes, it's all about Bob tonight because he sometimes becomes this guru of churning out golden nuggets. And so tonight we're going to talk to him. Yes, him, Bob. Hello, Bob.
Well, greetings. Yeah. And this is a Blindside Bob night.
Blindside Bob Knight. Okay,
That's one of my favorite things to do, by the way.
yeah, I know,
Really.
I know. That's why we have such a wonderful conversation every time that we chat. Before I get into asking you questions, let's bring in Daryl. Hello, Daryl.
Hello, I love Blindside Bob nights. He always is so good at that. I'm looking forward to hearing how he responds.
Yeah, I'm sure he's going to put many things on the table tonight. Hello, Diana.
Hi, Dr. Jones. How you doing? And hi, Bob. Time for some improvisation, is it?
Evidently. Yeah. We'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Diana, I'm proud that you went out and bought, what was it, 2 or 3 dozen donuts?
I bought a dozen glazed donuts.
Oh, my God.
Right after the show, I went to the grocery store to pick up that card that I had inadvertently dropped. And while I was there, you had mentioned donuts. And I'm thinking, donuts. Oh, hell yeah. So I bring home a dozen glazed donuts, and I ate 4 of them already. So, yeah, I still have some work to do before I can get into that swimsuit before July.
That's so neat. That's so neat. I love a donut. What's your favorite donut, Daryl?
My favorite donut. I really enjoy the glazed ones, but every once in a while I like to eat a coconut donut.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
not bad.
I like
Not
those.
not bad at all. Sometimes we go to Krispy Kreme, and when they are manufacturing these donuts, we get them as they drop, and oh, they're hot, they're wonderful. You go to heaven and stay there for about 5 minutes, and then you have to come back down to earth. But it's certainly heavenly at these donut shops. But with that said, none of these donuts compare to the cooking of Bob Graves. I mean, he's brilliant, but so many people don't know that he's actually a chef. Yes, he's a sound engineer. He's a linguist. He's so good in many different fields. But when it comes to pleasing his wife with cooking and everything else, he does a superb job. When he was here in Pensacola, I couldn't have eaten any better because Bob Graves is that chef. When did you pick that up, Bob, being a chef?
Well, actually, my very first full-time job was as a donut maker at a cider mill.
Uh-oh.
But I was still a teenager. But it's kind of perhaps a sad story. But my mom, when I was growing up, at around the age of 10 or 11, I'm not really sure now. The sequence of events is a bit foggy. But my mom fell into a depression and was drinking a lot, and she kind of just became unavailable. And if I was going to eat, I was going to have to fix my food. And I started doing that and started fixing. I was even starting to fix breakfast for everybody and anybody who wanted it. And I enjoyed it. I just had a lot of fun doing it. And as after my mom managed to get a grip on things, I just continued doing a lot of cooking and experimenting. And oddly enough, it all began with a joke. I was listening to some stand-up comedian. I have no idea who he was, just a little kid at the time, and he said, "My girlfriend's a pretty good cook. She's recently mixed Jello with pudding, and she calls it judin." And I thought, I'm going to give that a try. And that was the first thing I did. I mixed a vanilla pudding with a raspberry Jello, and I loved it.
Sounds
I
marvelous.
think I remember a commercial that Jello put out maybe about 40 years ago or more, where they actually did that.
Hmm.
Did some sort of what do you call that? Not a fondue. I cannot remember that layered dessert that you've got in the cup that you've got going.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
But
And
yeah, you had a layer that was Jello, a layer that was mixed, and then a layer that was pudding on top. So yeah, that sounds wonderful.
yeah. And if you're clever, one of the things go ahead, Daryl. What?
I think that was Bill Cosby that did that commercial, wasn't it?
Yes, I think you're right.
Yeah, he was a big Jello guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and one of the things I did when I was particularly clever is I'd take the glass containers that I'd put the layers of Jello and pudding in, and I'd tilt the glass so that the first couple of layers were at an angle, and then the top layer of pudding would then be, with the glass upright, so that the top was finally, flat. But I used to do that too. Just got to find something interesting.
Parfait. That's the word I was looking
Parfait,
for.
yeah.
Parfait.
Got it.
Hey, I like your pipe, Diana. Hello, Diana.
Pardon me.
Yeah.
I said, I like your pipe.
Oh, yay. Yeah, I picked this up years and years and years ago when I was trying to do the boy thing, and I never really put it down. And it's a lot cheaper than cigarettes, let me tell you.
Is it?
Actually, what would be a lot cheaper than that is just to not smoke at all. And that would make my doctor really happy, but I haven't got there yet.
Okay. Hey, Bob, first question. And this is something that I think is meaningful, especially if someone is attempting to suspend judgment, that is, when we're talking about the question of God and the disciplines as well. So the question is, can we merely suppose that some claim is true while exploring the implications rather than believing it?
Well, the answer to that question, I don't think, is as straightforward as we might like it to be. If by the question you mean can we, I think yes, we can. Do we? Usually not. I think that culturally we're trained to be, particularly with men, we're trained to be people who, I know what I'm talking about. And in fact, my wife and I were talking about this just yesterday, that during the time when our home was destroyed by the flood of 2006, and as we're rebuilding, we're learning as we're going how to rebuild things. And I would go to Home Depot or Lowe's or other supply stores. And if I ever ran into a guy and to ask questions, oh, what do I need to do this? Oh my goodness, they all knew the answer. And most of the answers we got were wrong. But if I talked to a woman who was working there at the store, she would say things like, well, I think you need to do this. Or she might say, I don't know. She had no problem if she didn't know the answer of, and I finally got to the point after being led astray so many times that I'd wander around until I found a woman who worked at the store to ask. But because I'd usually get a better answer, and if she didn't know, I would know that she didn't know. But I think that there's something, I don't know whether it's about men or whether it's about our culture. I'm not sure. But I think that many people feel this obligation to be certain. And if that's an obligation you feel you must have, well, you're gonna grasp at straws and assert great confidence when you don't really know. So I think that whether that's a biologically induced trait or some insecurity or some learned behavior or some culture, I don't know which, but I think that a lot of us fail to do that. But I think we certainly can. I mean, when you believe something to be the case, and I was talking to somebody earlier about this today, that if you believe something to be the case, if you're going to be honest with yourself, you know that that's what you believe, but you also may know that you don't have the goods to prove it. So, and I think that can be the case. And I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of things that I think I believe that I realize that I've got to keep an open mind about that because I don't really know. But I do believe a number of things, and there's some things you can never prove. I mean, are there people out there who like you, do you have friends you can trust? How do you know that? Well, you don't, but there's a certain degree of faith that you place in some friends that you've been through thick and thin, perhaps with them, and you're inclined to risk that as the direction. But do you know that? I don't know that you do, but you can pretend you do, and I don't advise that. But so can we? Yes. Do we? Not as often as we really should.
Okay, several years ago, I authored this thought experiment, and you seem to really, really like it. And it's called the ball.
Ah, I like that. Yeah, it was wonderful. I thought I thought it was very clear. At least that's the way I resonated with it.
Can you look at this once again? Can you go through that thought experiment with many of the people? Because this is what I like to do with my son and with you, simply because you guys are brilliant. You guys are very, very good at putting it together in a way that people can say, "Yeah, this is really nice." And so put that thought experiment out there and give the example that you did me the other day.
Oh,
You were
okay.
trying to add something to it, and it was just an example of what we see with rats and numbers.
Oh,
Hint, hint.
okay. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. In this thought experiment, as you introduced it, was we gave this analogy. There's this ball inside of which we live, and the surface of the ball represents the extent and limitations of our knowledge. What's outside the ball? We don't know. We might be able to guess. We might be able to come up with ideas that might even be reasonably based upon what we imagine what happens as we reach the horizon of the surface of the ball and things like that. But in the end, we don't know. It remains to us a mystery, and it is something that we just cannot know. But I thought that I was thinking the other day that I could think of some other analogies that might help make this a little more solid, and that is that something that psychiatrists, or excuse me, psychologists love to do is they love to test rats. It's just an obsession they have, I think, for when it comes to experimentation. And one of the things that we've done with rats is we've tried to see if rats can learn how to solve a maze. And we've discovered a great number of mazes that rabbits are capable of solving. A rat can discover, for example, that they seem to be making progress by using every other turn, not every turn, but every other turn. And once they figure out that that seems to be the way to do it, they can then go into another maze that's maybe designed differently, but take this at heuristic and go through every other turn and right through the maze, no problem. Or you can come up with other ways of designing the maze. But there's one kind of maze that rats can't solve. And that's a maze that's designed under prime numbers, where maybe they have to take the first turn, the second turn, the third, the fifth, the seventh, the 11th, the 13th, and things like this. They just can't solve it. It's a mystery to them. And the reason why it is a mystery to them is, well, fundamentally, they're rats. They didn't evolve with the kind of a brain that possesses an algorithm that can appreciate that kind of math. And as a result, they can't solve that problem because they don't have a brain capable of it. So there's a sense in which a maze built based on prime number design is forever a mystery to them. That is the surface of that ball for them. Now, unless we're going to think of ourselves as gods in our mind and not actually human beings, we also have a brain. Our brain evolved, and our brain has a great number of very intelligent algorithms within it. But we don't know what algorithms we don't have. And we don't know what algorithms that we don't have could actually prove to be very useful in making sense of the universe. And as a result, those aspects of the universe that might very well be best explained through those sorts of algorithms will, to us, always be a mystery. They will always be unknown. And I think that was an argument for me, both in saying that I don't think we need, I think we need to admit it's possible that we will never be able to understand reality, because a full grasp of reality might require algorithms of the brain that have never evolved in the human species. and also that represents that surface of the ball outside of which we don't know the answers, can't know the answers, are incapable of the concepts that would explain them to us. I can't hear you.
You're muted, apparently.
Okay, I had my cough switch.
Oh, good.
Did you like that?
I did. I couldn't hear you cough, so I guess that was good.
It worked, actually. Okay, anytime that we have pollen, I do cough, and so that's unfortunate about me. One of the things that we're getting into, we are getting into the area in which we have talked about atheism and theism for a long, long time, and I keep asking atheists and theists alike to be on this show, that is, to put something compelling on the table, and I have yet to see anything compelling. And so when I keep saying atheism and theism have nothing compelling, I get a bit of pushback. In fact, some people are upset that I say that atheism has nothing compelling. Many people feel as if these positions are, rational. Theists are arguing that they're, the conclusion that they're drawing is a very rational one, and the same thing is true with atheists. So, what are your thoughts on this great
Let me go
debate
back-
not being so
Let me
great?
go back
and
to the
all?
rats
Yeah.
then here. Why is it that the rats can't solve the prime number maze? Is it because they're stupid? Is it because they have a faulty memory? Is it because they're not feeling well today? No, I think the answer to that is really, well, they're rats, and rat brains don't possess that skill. I suspect that the question of God, in order for it to be genuinely and realistically solved, is something that's actually beyond the ability of human beings. And as a result, our attempts to do it either cause us to, in a faulty way, I think, reach the conclusion that there is no God, or reach the faulty conclusion that there is, And I think this helps to explain that the reason why we have such absurd and ridiculous theologies is not because, well, there is no God, but because to try to understand that question and what it implies and what God would be like if God exists is just something we don't do. That's not within our skill set. And so as a result, I'm a person who, I think that if somebody actually believes in God, but recognizes that their theology is but a framework within which to try to grab a hold of something that they can do something with, but that they don't take it seriously, I don't have a problem with that kind of belief. And if a person is living as an atheist, I was actually listening to Michael Shermer the other day saying that, intellectually he's an agnostic, but that he lives as an atheist. He lives as if there is no God. I have no problem with that kind of a position at all. What else is he going to do? If this is something he doesn't resonate with, he doesn't resonate with it. But he's brilliant enough to recognize agnostically that how the hell would he know?
Right.
What are the methods we could apply scientifically to this question that we've developed and verified as methods that can actually tell us whether or not there is or is not a God? How do we test those methods? How do we determine that those methods actually work? We can't. We don't. We're not even sure what that would look like. So as a result, I don't have a problem with people that believe or don't believe in God, but I do believe that that question is in many ways beyond us.
When it comes to being Gnostic, that is, in theism and atheism, why do you think that people would go so far as to say that they know that there is no God or know that there is a God? What's going on there?
Well, I think that's we're going back to an earlier question here. As you asked me earlier, I don't know that this is a problem that deals with just the issues of God or no God. It's not just a religious question. It's a political question. It's a sociological question. It's an economic question. Why do people believe in capitalism, but other people believe in socialism? Why do some people lean to the left and other people lean to the right? I think that in many ways we're dealing with questions of value for which we don't really have the ability to nail that down to the floor. And so we stick with the things that we think we can figure out, or the things that we have been able to resonate with, or the things that have not harmed us. And we stay away from the ideas that either have harmed us, or that we've perceived have harmed us, or that we know have harmed us. And so, I think that in this sense, the risks of life are such that we seem to comfort ourselves in the illusion that we have it all figured out. And we don't. And I don't know that we need to.
The reason that I ask you the same question sometimes differently is to get you to say what you just said. In other words,
Oh,
you
cool.
tend to get into more detail, and that's the thing that I enjoy. And so, yes, I get redundant, but it's on purpose. I mean, come on. You've got to put some gold out tonight.
Well, we'll give it a try. Yeah.
Diana, you've been an atheist for a long, long time. And what do you think about Bob? I mean, Bob is this multi-axial theist, and he's the kind of guy that will say, I don't know, but I resonate with theistic issues or theistic modeling. What say you?
Well, I'm all for saying I don't know to the general question. I mean, it goes back to your ball. If God is outside the ball and we can't see outside the ball, we cannot know anything about that God. Now, what I'll do is then take the position, well, that a God may exist, it may not exist. I cannot access that God, so I'll live as if the God doesn't exist until it shows up.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll break through the ball and say, "Hi, Diana, how you doing?" And, "Oh, hi, God, I've been meaning to ask you a few things."
Sure. And
Um,
how could you possibly be obligated to do anything different than that? I mean,
yeah,
if there is a God, would that God be so stupid as to not recognize the problem we're up against? I mean, that just doesn't make sense to me. As a result, my theology, if we can call it that, about God doesn't entertain the notion of a God who would require anybody to have a sense of its existence. You do or you don't, and the truth is, when it comes down to it, what we can really know, there very well may not be any such thing as any God at all. Maybe there is, but whatever kind of God it is probably not the kind of God that is entertained the core of religious dogma by any long shot. That I feel pretty certain about, not because, the main reason I feel that way is because when you examine most theologies, they're so, they serve a certain class of people so very neatly, and not always the best people.
Okay, this is a challenging question, and I did get some pushback on stating this earlier. I said, in a weird sense, atheism and theism are positions of faith. Would you agree with that?
I certainly would. Sure. Yeah. I mean, since we're talking about something that cannot be known with certainty, if there's one of those that you truly resonate with, then that's where you're at. But what can you do with that? Not much. But the moment you begin getting Gnostic or dogmatic, as if this is something I don't know. It makes it hard for me to take that seriously. Maybe that's not nice of me, and I have to lend my ear a little harder. But I don't get that personally.
Some people claim that they just lack belief, and that's all there is to it. And when you ask them the question whether, there is a God, or if you take it a little bit further, does God exist? Typically from those same kind of people, they will say, I don't think so. But I don't know, but I don't think so. And so, in a sense, if you have a view, especially if you're saying, all gods are bullshit, if you become like that, isn't a viewpoint a a belief?
The way I understand it, yeah.
Yeah.
And so if my view is I'm living life as if there is no God, that certainly is a belief. And in a similar way, it's the way that Christians live. They live as if there is God, and that is the thing that they call faith. And so they are living out their experience or their narrative, if you will. They have a worldview, and it's very much something that they call the faith. I like the writer of the book of Hebrews. He talks about one following another person's faith. In other words, a person has a perspective of truth, and I keep saying that perspectives are interesting within the framework of the Bible, simply because Paul said that he moved from faith to faith. Better put, he moved from one perspective to another. And so his perspective of, let's say, of X was actually something that has been rendered many times as faith. And sometimes we need to admit that faith has various usages. And so I don't really like it when people try to say, well, this is faith. It simply means to pretend, and that's it. It's like they're trying to set up a game that they can win so they can look good. And I don't know that most people in the context of the great debate, especially those who are making a living by marketing atheism or theism, it doesn't seem like they want to be honest about the multiple usages of the word faith and the multiple usages of the word theist. I stated earlier in a conversation, I said just as we have multiple theories of truth, for instance, we have correspondence theory, we have coherence theory, we have consensus theory of truth. Well, the same thing is true when it comes to theism. There are many theories of theism. There are many different kinds of theists, and all theists are not making the same claim. Some theists are not making a claim at all. They're simply resonating, and so it's all over the place. But typically, the God talk and the great debate is all about the funding type of talk. Why is that, Bob?
Well, don't fundies come in all flavors, and fundies also tend to be quite outspoken. And there are a lot of people who think or believe a lot of things for which they are appropriately humble, and they don't do a lot of talking about it. That's fine. Particularly since we live in a world where many times people will judge you for not taking a stand. Well, why talk about it? So as a result of that, in a world where people expect you to take a side, people who do take a side will tend to be the ones who speak up the most, I would think. So I don't even know that we know where most people could be found in that. Now, I heard something that sounded like it was going to become a question from you, and that is, this concept of confusing what is faith. For one thing, no human being can do anything that can't be done by a human being. And every human being that does anything cognitively does so by making use of human cognitive capacities. And among those cognitive capacities is the fact that human beings are often in various situations where they don't know the answers, but they still have to make decisions based upon what might be the answer. And as a result, I think that human beings have successfully evolved to a point where they have this ability to believe things relevant to the questions they have in the challenges of life. Now, some people have beliefs about God, some people don't. Some people have beliefs about society. Some have beliefs about relationships, about what is the best way to do this. Some have beliefs about morality. We all have beliefs. We all face questions that, for whatever reason, become important to us, and many of those questions involve things about which we cannot know with absolute certainty what the truth would be, but we're certainly going to work with what seems to work, and we can operate with belief. Now, let's talk about the upside and the downside of this. If I believe in God, and I realize that I don't know this, but I do believe in God, there's more than one response or effect that can have on my life. For one thing, I might become way too passive. I might think that, well, God has got his plan and I'm going to do this and do that. And so I tend to lead a passive life where I'm just waiting for God to act, or expecting that the things that a loving God would provide for me will just happen to be there. And I might discover that my way too passive approach to life is not working. On the other hand, if I believe in God, there's another possibility that I might feel that if there is a God out there, that there's hope. And that inspired by that hope, I might actually reach out for opportunities and things that I can do, having some trust that this will work. And by putting forth that effort, instead of being passive, I find I apply myself to the challenges of life, and I get somewhere. And attribute this to, well, thank you, God. And on the other side, what if I'm of the opinion that there is no God? Well, that can also have a good side or a bad side. If I don't believe in any God, I might find that, well, my goodness, the responsibility of life falls on me. I've got to accept full responsibility for these choices and these decisions and these perspectives. And it could inspire you to become an extremely responsible person who takes your opportunities in this short life that is going to one day end very seriously. Or believing that there's no God could make you feel like, well, then what the hell difference does it make? I can do anything I want as long as nobody catches me. So, it could seduce you down a dark path too. So it's not as if either of those options are good or bad. It depends on what you make of them, and both options are capable of good and bad outcomes, if we're going to be honest.
That's very good. Daryl, I wanted to go to you and ask you a question about nurturing. You and Tina have been married for a long, long time, and you have more kids than Abraham. What can you tell us tonight about nurturing that has been successful in raising children?
Well, I can tell you what has and what hasn't at the same time. Some of my early days of raising children was based on trying to instill in them a fear of God, so to speak. I want to say fear of God, not necessarily being afraid of God, but just an awesome respect that you would obey someone because you felt like, they're the ones that deserve the obedience, and that obedience is going to ultimately make your life good or bad, And when I look back to those days, I was looking for a product that was just like me. I felt like my success would be graded by how much they turned out to be like me. And when I think on that now, I can say that I won't necessarily say I'm ashamed of it, but I'm very appreciative of the fact that I changed my viewpoint when it comes to that. Because as I look at my children now, sometimes I feel so inadequate to lead them the way they need to go. And I think I'm pretty accurate in that. But that's not really what I need to do in the first place. I look at most of my children as having gone beyond where I've been able to go for some reason or another. Whether I was hindered by trying to satisfy this notion of God, and to a large degree, I think that's what it was. And maybe they have abilities I don't have, but I can look at them and appreciate what they achieve. And I'm there for their support. I'm there whenever they need me, anything I can supply as a person who loves them to the point that, I would do anything for them. And that I have found to be very successful. There's a relationship there that, as far as I'm concerned, can't be beat. And it's honest because I know my limitations. And also, I realize possibly the worst thing I could do would be to try to get them to fit into my pattern, to be like me. And that's, when I look at them and I see that they're not, it's very encouraging. Although, I will admit there's a few characteristics there that identify them as my children, and I kind of like that too. But I love the fact that they have achieved and are able to achieve so much more than I have.
Back when you were a fundamentalist, I used to observe you looking at your children and assessing them. And now, since you have come a long way, you've come out of fundamentalism and all of that, it's almost as if you appreciate who your children are much, much more. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And at one time back, I was a pretty strict disciplinarian, and I am ashamed to admit that because I know what it means as I understand it now. But we would get compliments constantly. We'd go into a restaurant and sit and eat, and people would come up to us and say, "You have the most well-behaved children we've ever seen." And they were very well-behaved, and they were afraid not to be, you might say. And we still hear that a lot. You've done an excellent job raising your children. Well, I'm not going to argue with that because hopefully we have done some things along the way that have really benefited them. But the thing is now I look at them as successful human beings that have gone their own way, that are able to think for themselves and to they're not limited to what they can achieve if they so desire, because they have I think part of it is due to the realization that they have people that are going to support them, that are behind them all the way. And even if you want to say possibly somewhat of a safety net, I mean, if something goes wrong, we'll be there to help them any way we can to make it right.
If you had it all over to do again, what would you do differently as a father to your children?
Well, not much different than what I'm doing now, but I would have started when they were children rather than waiting till later in life when I understand the benefits of it.
Can I push back on that a bit? I would say this, that I think that when I was younger, like Daryl, I was, a fundamentalist, and I think that I now can see how that affected a lot of people in a way that I don't appreciate. And I changed. Well, you know what? I haven't seen how life works out yet with that new idea. So far, it's been great, but I'm sure I'm still making mistakes. And I think that we're still going to discover more about child development. I think we're going to still recognize that we've got a long way to go before we're raising children without inadvertently harming them. But there's a sense in which we're now experimenting with a new paradigm. I think this is a far more promising one. But at the same time, we're yet to see in what ways this one needs to be improved. And I think that we are in a new era of what I would call illiberalism. We have a lot of young kids who've grown up in homes where there was not this kind of abuse or that kind of abuse, and where they weren't spanked, and this. But some of these kids also don't seem to understand certain concepts of responsibility that was unfortunately beaten into other kids from other generations. And so I sometimes wonder if we've gone too far in certain ways. I don't know, what were the answers. I think we need to search this out. And for me, what worked for me was when my wife and I, before our daughter was born, we took a class called STEP, Strategic Training for Effective Parenting. To this day, I very much appreciate the ideas that we started with there and the way that we've allowed those ideas to expand and develop since then. But basically, it was one where we tried to respect our children's decisions, gave them the right to make whatever decisions they were capable of making, and just help them to own the outcome and decide for themselves if they wanted to continue to experience those outcomes or not, so that they took the responsibility for the decisions and choices they would make based on how it was working for them. And,
You know,
Bob, I couldn't agree more on the point that you made there. I think it's one of the greatest challenges we have. I mean, if we're going to succeed as a race, and I'm talking about the human race, we need to keep working toward this, and to say that we have all the answers, crazy. I hope we can continue to move forward in the way that not only the way we raise our children, but just the way we relate to one another.
yes, I agree. I agree.
let
Yeah.
me see if any of you guys resonate with this. I love being a grandfather. I love being a father. And I have done my best to nurture my children. Very, very proud of them. And I would change a handful of things that might have produced a better outcome. I don't know. But I admit that things have changed. That is my viewpoint toward, that is what you would do, that is to nurture children. And so I'm very much an advocate of giving yourself to new ideas, fresh thoughts, that is. But my wife and I have experienced not just nurturing our children and grandchildren, but we nurture each other. It's almost as if, there is a passage in the Bible that talks about the two become one. And my wife and I, we resonate with that. And so when something happens, it's hard to say Michael without saying Rhonda, or Rhonda without saying Michael. We live that close. We live life to the max as one. A lot of people don't understand it, but other people live differently, and that's fine with me. But my point is, or possibly my question would be, have you guys experienced what it means to nurture your wife, and possibly your wife nurturing you? Have you ever experienced something like that?
I can certainly say yes to that. As a matter of fact, tomorrow my wife is leaving to go approximately 600 miles. About 500 miles, she'll stop and see her dad, and then the last 100 miles, she's going to see my mom. Well, I would be going with her if I could, but there's just no way I can leave my business right now. And it's spring break, so, she's got the opportunity to do this. But I told her today that the reason that I'm okay with this is, my mom is 89 years old, and I never know when will be the last time that I will see her. But for my wife to go see her is almost, it's so close to me going to see her that it satisfies me, because the relationship that we have is so close that actually for my mom, it might even be better that she sees my wife than to see me. And so I understand exactly where you're coming from there. And it is a wonderful thing. Wow, it's powerful in so many ways.
Bob, what are your thoughts on nurturing one another?
Well, there certainly will be times when my wife and I, one of us might go to the other with a bit of pain or concerns or uncertainty, and the other one of us will listen and then respond with something like, "I don't care." No. But the sense that we are teammates in an endeavor that is a joint endeavor for us is certainly something that we've always been learning how to do, and I'm very thankful for that. And oddly enough, this may sound strange, but back in 2006, when our home was destroyed in a flood, Lisa and I both, there's a ton of work to do, and we were also quite stressed by the loss of everything. I mean, we had water 4 feet shy of a roof. We were away on vacation at the time when the flood hit, and it was in a house that, although it was 85 years old, had never been touched by flood. So, we were like, in some ways lost, but we were partners, and it actually helped us to recognize how genuinely committed we were to working as a team, using the skills and strengths that each of us brought to that challenge, and knowing that we could count on each other. So that was there was a sense in which, as horrible as it was to have that loss, it was a blessing to us in our relationship because of that. And I'm just very thankful that that our relationship was headed in that kind of a direction even before that tragedy struck. So I feel very fortunate, and I often tell people that my wife and I have had a good enough relationship. It makes me look like I'm better at choosing a life partner than I really am. I'm very fortunate in that. But the question of nurturing each other, all of us will have scars, questions, times when we're not really sure of ourselves, or times when we're even beating ourselves up, and it is so helpful to have somebody there who is encouraging, in terms of just uh, patient, kind, and recognizing that when there's been any kind of damage like that, it needs healing, it needs help, and so that's the way we've tried to manage it. And so and that's, by the way, a learning process, because there are also sometimes when one of us might be going through a challenge of some sort, and we want to see if we can face it ourselves first, or sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And so there's also that need to give each other a certain amount of space with those sorts of things. So but nonetheless, what it comes down to is an attempt to try to walk that fine line of what's in the other person's best interests and what helps them to become even more of who it is they are becoming, and what the real developmental possibilities are for this person that really serve their meaningful life well. If you're committed to that, you don't even necessarily know what that means or what it's going to look like, but you're certainly attempting to behave in a manner that facilitates that in any way you can. And I think the longer you're involved in a meaningful or successful relationship, the more that just becomes second nature.
Uh, in my marriage, I will say this: my father was an amazing father. When I think about him, I can't help but smile and cry at the same time. I miss him so, so very much. My mother, she's such a gentle person. And when I was a kid, she would pray 6 to 7, up to 8 hours a day. It was phenomenal. When I was a kid, I was embarrassed that she would pray so much. I mean, I would invite friends to come over to the house, and they would say, "What's that noise?" I said, "That's my mother in the other room." And oh, she's praying, and it was hard to explain, but that's the way that I was raised. But my mother's always been there for me. She's always been an ally. She's always been, solid as a rock for me. And now she's going through this dementia, and it's tough on her. And so we are there for her. But I could describe my father-in-law and mother-in-law. They were there for my wife, but neither set of parents gave us everything that we need for life and its journey. And so I find myself nurturing Rhonda, and Rhonda is nurturing me. In other words, she grows me up, and I grow her up. This is a wonderful thing that we have experienced, and it's like the challenges. I don't think that I would have ever been so challenged without Rhonda. I mean, she challenges me A to Z, and I think this is the reason that I keep developing. And I don't see that that's true in many other relationships, and I'm not putting those down, and maybe I'm just not in the know, but I'm very, very thankful for the nurturing, for someone in my life that grows me the hell up and brings me to a place where I can see things with better light. But that's good. Diane, I want to bring you into the conversation. In relationships, do you see that the nurturing aspect of what goes on is not just useful, but in a sense a blessing?
I would say it's extremely important. I guess I'm the odd one out in this group. When I got married, it was for all the wrong reasons. I got married to run away from home, actually. So when I entered that relationship, I wasn't prepared. If you want to use that word, I hadn't grown up. In so many ways, I was still a kid, and I guess that contributed a lot to the fact that we eventually divorced. And then when Melody and I were together, we were together 11 years. I think that was because I didn't want to be lonely. And again, all the wrong reasons. I wasn't prepared to nurture her, and I don't think she was either. I certainly hope that she's found some happiness now, but were I to do it over again, no, I think I'd strike out on my own. Put away the fear of destitution, put away the fear of loneliness, and just go and do it, and try to be prepared for that.
I can relate to your story here because my first marriage lasted for 11 years, and I would characterize my first wife and myself, both of us, as people looking for an escape from a very difficult home life. Not like what Dr. Jones had, and we were looking to each other for a certain degree of salvation, and nobody's prepared to be anyone else's savior, and you can't give to someone else what you don't have. That marriage fell apart. It lasted 11 years, but I remained single for about 4 years after that fell apart. And by the time I was ready to remarry, Lisa and I, one of the things we talked about before we tied that knot was we agreed that we don't need the other person to complete us. We don't need the other person to make us happy. We're responsible for our own meaning in life and our own sense of completion in that, but that we get to have each other. And as a result, there was a real strong and winsome freedom from a lot of the drama that I see a lot of couples go through. I feel bad for them when they do that. The jealousies or the insecurities, and we were fortunate that we just didn't go through that phase in our relationship at any time. And so I'd have to say this: my second marriage was something that was radically different in many ways, paradigmically, than my first marriage. And my first marriage, I sometimes would describe it as, an accident looking for a place to happen.
Yeah, having stepped up to the plate twice and struck out both times, I've been alone 9 years now, and maybe I'm coming to the point where I might be able to engage in an actual relationship of equals. It's too bad that would happen when I'm 60 years old, but such is life. No, I don't think I'd get married. There are financial considerations to worry about there and everything, but a full-time relationship, I might consider. I'd have to think about it. I'd have to discuss it with this other person, but maybe, who knows?
Right.
You know, one of the things that I love about NCG here at the studio, it seems like people come here not just to build meaningful community, but we become so close. Many of the people here feel like family. You know, Jack has said just over and over again, this is my family. So many people will say, this is my family. We have a young lady named Tammy, and she will say, you know, this is my family, and on and on and on. And so when we get together, like for Christmas, a lot of times we will eat here in the studio, and we may have just lots and lots of people, and it's in that kind of context. There's just a lot of bonding. Does that make sense? It's friendship, but it's almost like saying, "Wow, we are building a core group of people who will never leave each other nor forsake each other." It's wonderful because people are very faithful to each other. People are very giving to each other, and they do nurture, and we're very, 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 very thankful for it. What are your thoughts on that? Because I mean, even Diana, when she started doing some shows with us, my wife and I talk about Diana all the time, and there's just something just special there. It's doing us more good than it is her, and so
Yeah. Diana, welcome to the family.
yeah.
Really, really.
Well, Danke, sure. And it does feel like family. I mean, I can't reach out and give you a hug at the moment, but I guess this is the next best thing.
It'll work. It'll work. You know, and I think that when we come together in this kind of community, and of course, a lot of people watch this. You know, we don't even know them from anyone. I mean, because it's not that kind. But those of us who have been together here doing this, you know, we come from diverse backgrounds, have diverse concerns, diverse needs, but the more we get to know each other, the more we become aware of how you know, people are precious, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, no matter what they're struggling with. There's something about their simply being human beings that that beckons us, that charms us into respecting them as human beings, and wanting to see how our relationship with them can actually bring the best out and in all of us. And so there's a sense here in which we're talking about nurturing each other as friends and as community.
Chris Hill asked this question. What do you think, Bob, of the statement, the great mystery must be more intelligent than the great debaters? For apart from the great mystery, there may not be any great debaters. Is that a reasonable question?
Well, hey, you know, I like Chris. What a wonderful person he's been. He's asked us lots of questions, made lots of statements, and he's given us a great deal of encouragement as well. Could you read that again? Because I want to make sure that I get the gist of what he's saying. So read it one more time.
Okay. The great mystery must be more intelligent than the great debaters. For apart from the great mystery, there may not be any great debaters.
I like that. I really do. Now, there's a couple of different ways one could take what he's saying there. I do think that the Dunning-Kruger effect actually applies here too. People who are, either fortunately or through discipline, a little more intelligent, tend to be a lot more humble about what it is they think they know. And people who are not that intelligent, they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know that they don't know it. And as a result, they tend to have a strange sense of confidence. And so I would say that the ability to accept conundrum and mystery while, you know, trying to come at it with a humility of belief, if that's what you have, it does demand of us a level of intelligence. But it's another way that one could take it is if, you know, the mystery, if there is something really behind this mystery, it's definitely far more intelligent than we are. Yes.
That's good. That's good. We're out of time, by the way, but Daryl, what are your final thoughts on everything that's been talked about tonight?
Well, I want to say a couple of things. One is, without going into any detail, my favorite song of all time is one that my wife wrote, and it's called "We Are Family." And I got to hear my pianist son play it just a few days ago. And it's not the words are not only fantastic, but it's a beautiful piece of music. But when I think about what that means to me, I consider myself very spoiled. Uh, I I know what it is to be in a loving family, and that goes way beyond just immediate. My wife, my children, my siblings, etc. Uh, when I was released from the idea of Christianity, that instilled in me kind of an idea of if you meet certain qualifications, then you're my brother, you're my sister. I look at it now, if you're a human being, then you're my brother, you're my sister. And I like my family. I enjoy my family. It's very diverse. We got some problems in the family. Some people don't know what it's like to be faithful, to be considerate, to be loving, but maybe they just haven't had a chance to learn. I don't know. But to approach people in that manner is wonderful because most of the time the response is good because family is wonderful. Being a part of someone that cares, realizing someone loves you, someone cares about you, will go a long way in a person's life. And so, and let me just give you a recent example. I can't help but think about this. I got a phone call yesterday. Actually, it was a message on my machine that said, I need my house washed. Can you give me a price? So I called the guy and I didn't recognize the area code, had no idea where he lives. We talked and I said, I'll locate it for you. He needed it washed today, a Sunday. So I said, I've even got a man that doesn't mind working on Sundays a lot of times. I'll check with him. Sure enough, he said, yeah, I'll do it. So I called the guy back and said, it costs you X amount of dollars and we'll do it for you. Well, I'll be down there sometime today. And he does a good job, he knows what he's doing. I said, oh, he'll do a good job and I will pay you. Well, I couldn't tell in his voice, but sure enough, when I went to look at the house, it was a little Hispanic community here in the area. And so I wasn't even sure, but I figured he was probably Hispanic. And so we got the house washed. And I went over there this afternoon and met him. And he loved the job we did and handed me some cash. And I put it in my pocket. I didn't even count it. There was just such a honesty in the relationship. It's like, oh, well, I got to meet one of my brothers and we have a relationship now. It was that simple. But there's just something about being able to live like that is wonderful. And as Bob said, maybe it can get better. Maybe hopefully we can continue to grow and learn things that will move us forward. But I know I'll say this much: I love the direction we're going.
That's good. Thank you so much for sharing that. Diana, what are your final thoughts?
I guess I would say that a solid relationship is absolutely necessary to people, but they have to have enough going on to engage in that. So it's a give and take, and I think by giving, one receives more than they give. So if that can be done, that's to the betterment of all.
That's good. That's good. Bob, final thoughts.
Well, as we're talking about relationships, we haven't we haven't mentioned the fact that there are a lot of different kinds of relationships that we can benefit from. when we don't have it all figured out, when we might be in some ways harmed or damaged, or our development has been in some ways impeded, it is wonderful if there's somebody who is a trustworthy and truly respecting and loving mentor can kind of help us straighten that out, and that's going to be a different kind of relationship than with somebody who is a real partner in a sense, and it's a different kind of relationship that we have with friends and community and people that it's a pleasure to be able to meet and interact with. So these relationships are all very different. But even what Diana says here, that there does seem to be a certain degree of autonomous, comprehended dignity that we need to have before we can actually enter into a deeper relationship, because we're just going to come into that relationship with so much need that no other human being can really meet. There are some needs that we have for each other. We are social beings. We really need the love and the connection with other people. But we need that because that's how we continue to just blossom and grow. But there's a certain way in which we need fundamentally to love ourselves, to treasure ourselves, to respect ourselves, and to feel that I don't know everything, but if I have a sense that whoever it is that I am, whatever it is that I am, is adequate to a meaningful life, and I'm not looking for someone else to compensate for my inadequacy, I think that things are going to be better, and we can seek to have relationships with healing people, with people in the community who care enough to help us grab a hold of that sense of self. But the truth is, bottom line, self-respect is a job that belongs to each of us and to no one else.
Excellent. I could not have said it better, and I'm thankful for all of you being on the show with me. And so, with that said, we're out of here, and know that we love you. Bye-bye.